What's up, it's ENDYMION, and recently Games Workshop has announced a whole new slew of content coming from the Warhammer 40K universe in the form of miniatures and more. But if reports are to be believed, things aren't going well for the company. Beyond this, the Assassin's Creed nonsense just keeps piling up. And the discourse has reached a fever point where journalists are now saying that players just flat out don't want to play people of color in leading roles within Assassin's Creed games. Which is not true at all, but we'll get there. To begin, Games Workshop hosted a livestream recently where they announced a bunch of new products around things like the Horus Heresy and factions like the Gene Stealers. Suspiciously, the chat was completely locked off and unable to be used by anyone watching, which already kind of told me that Games Workshop wanted to announce their products without having to worry with the actual paying customers, voicing their opinions, which is already not a good sign. It's never a good look when you have roughly 7,000 people watching your livestream about your brand, and you silence every one of their voices so that they can't speak their mind. We know why they're doing it, we're not stupid, but it's sad to see anyways. What's funny to see, however, is that since the whole female Adeptus Custodes backlash, Games Workshop probably thinks that the worst is over. Yet instead, on what I'll show you, the damage seems to be long-standing instead. From Wargamer, we have this article titled, Adeptus Custodes Wiped Out of Competitive Warhammer 40K. A new report on Warhammer tournaments results by website StatCheck claims the Adeptus Custodes are being crushed on the top tables. StatCheck is a website that keeps track of every single Warhammer tabletop game win from things like official tournaments and then compiles all of that information into graphs. So players of the hobby can accurately see which factions are performing well and which aren't. Here's the graph on screen here, which, yeah, I know, it's a lot of stuff being presented here at once. But what's interesting is that the Adeptus Custodes have actually been seemingly all but wiped out of competitive play by other factions. While in brackets like beginner and intermediate, Custodes are still winning quite a bit, the higher ups in the skill bracket you get within the official tournament settings, the worse it's going for the faction, and that's putting it lightly. In fact, the actual super hardcore audience of Warhammer has all but rejected and buried the Custodes as a viable faction within their hobby. As seen here via Reddit, where StatCheck's Clifford Thomas, who compiles those huge amounts of data, says themselves, Custodes have likely disappeared as a competitive option altogether and have quite literally disappeared from the faction win rate peer versus peer, due to an abysmal 23% win rate among upper quartile ELO players. This may seem like nothing, but you need to realize how competitive gaming affects the market and economy of each individual entertainment property. If something becomes meta in, say, an online game like Destiny, players will swarm that particular weapon or ability because it heightens their possibility of victory. The same can be said about any other game like Call of Duty or even something like Warcraft and beyond. The more viable classes become the go-to picks, which in turn affects the community as a whole, but it obviously goes well beyond this. Whatever becomes meta will also affect the sales of anything tied to those specific concepts within a franchise's broader marketing. Mass Effect is a good example of this. There's a reason why BioWare sells an actual pillow with Garrus or Tali on it and it sells like crazy, and yet you don't have those options for, say, Ashley or Caden. Whatever becomes meta will also affect the sales of anything tied to those specific concepts within a franchise's broader marketing. Because the fandom of Mass Effect clearly loves those characters, which is also why BioWare in this case has plenty of other products tied to both Garrus and Tali due to their fan love. You could say the same thing for Baldur's Gate with Astarion or Shadowheart, or Assassin's Creed with someone like Ezio Auditore. When things are popular within a game's actual world, they trickle down and create new opportunities outside of the game's core gimmick for further monetary gain. Circling this all back to Warhammer, the disrespect and mass exodus of people rejecting female Custodes and the treatment Games Workshop has done to the brand in general has resulted in not only Custodes selling less than they normally would, but they are now being seen as pathetic banners to rally behind within the hardcore Warhammer community. Which is why you're seeing the Custodes in this case being singled out from the other factions when it comes to their performance and popularity. What's happening with the Custodes right now is but a mere taste of the continued decline of that faction's popularity, marketability, and general respect it'll get from the Warhammer community and beyond. This is why when I say you need to respect your customers and the things within franchises, because when you don't, you lose more than just money. You lose popularity and sustainability within these environments too. The fact the Adeptus Custodes have pretty much been all but eliminated from players by various levels of Warhammer is going to drive that faction's popularity into the darkest of the abyss. And in turn, it will leave Games Workshop with a slew of products that nobody wants to buy because of what they represent. Games Workshop has effectively killed off the Adeptus Custodes brand completely within a month of making some very moronic choices on their end. And if in 1 month your entire faction has become obsolete from both competitive play and marketing, imagine where that faction will be in a year or two. These companies are shaving off pieces of their own corporate body to appease people with identity politics by pushing things like the female Custodes. And in return, Games Workshop has gained nothing short of zero help from any of these groups claiming that they champion Custodes. Of course, the Custodes were also apparently nerfed, which obviously affected their viability within the actual 40k tabletop, but you combine that with the cultural rejection they've received by the broader community, and it's a recipe for disaster. Warhammer, like others, has become subjugated to the "we need more females in male spaces" rhetoric that keeps happening. But it also seems that when companies do this, it does nothing but more harm than good. It actually reminds me of this one streamer person who I never heard of until recently because they pretty much went viral for all the wrong reasons. The person in question is named Jehana, or I think that's how you pronounce it. Also, don't harass this person, but they posted this on social media recently and, well, let's take a look.
She wouldn't last 10 minutes in a COD lobby is not, nor has it ever been, a valid excuse for men to act like pieces of human garbage in gaming. I shouldn't have to play a game where all I say is hi and the whole game is thrown and I'm in hell for the next 40 minutes because men are being emotional about it. That is not normal, and that's not how the old COD days were, because I promise you, as a man, you have never had somebody throw on the basis of your gender. That doesn't happen. You can say it happens. You're lying. I'm sorry. I don't know why that's such a common thing in the comments of my videos. You guys want to be oppressed so bad that you'll look at a man calling me telling me he's gonna tell me to get back in the kitchen and say it's not a woman thing and say that that happens to you too. It doesn't. There's a reason that historically male-dominated spaces are known for being toxic and unsafe. That goes for gaming, that goes for sports. Any male-dominated space is a bad one. That's not me being sexist. That is me saying there is an inherent issue with the way that you guys have your locker room talk that makes everybody else feel unsafe. I don't know how you could possibly find it fun to make other people feel unsafe. No woman is asking men to make gaming a safe space with sunshine and rainbows and everything, but could you please be normal? Because I want to be able to enjoy playing the game without my life being threatened, without my body being threatened, because I'm existing as a woman. And men are the ones making it unsafe. And I do not care if you feel targeted by me saying men, or if you feel attacked by me saying men. You are part of the problem. If you feel attacked by that, you're part of the problem. If you say just mute them, you're part of the problem. If you sit there and let them say that to me and you don't intervene, you are part of the problem. Because I have a lot of male friends, normal male friends, who don't say slurs and don't threaten people and just play like normal. I understand it is not all men. But if you are not one of the men doing this, it is entirely on you to help stop the men who are. If you don't understand that and you don't understand power imbalances and gender hierarchy, it's not my place to teach you. I'm not your mother. I'm not your teacher. Close the game for 5 minutes and educate yourself. But stop making this a bad experience for everybody else who's just trying to play the game.
As you can see, this video has pretty much gone viral in the gaming section of the internet, with a lot of people having a lot of opinions on this, and that's putting it lightly. But what this streamer is saying is exactly why we're having a lot of these problems to begin with. Firstly, let's just be upfront about this and not beat around the bush. Video games are heavily male-dominated by default. It just is what it is, the same way makeup is heavily dominated by women as an industry too. Another main fact we need to just stop lying to ourselves about is that without men, the video game industry would crumble overnight. You can say whatever you want, oh, women make up 50% of players or whatever other supposed fact you want to scream. The reality is without men, video games would not be a sustainable industry. It just wouldn't. Stop lying to yourselves. Not to mention basically every console, PC, launcher, franchise, and so on, they are all pretty much made predominantly by men for men. Because that's how supply and demand works. If you want to cater to your demographic, you get people who are that demographic to make the things you want to sell to them. So naturally, if a bunch of dudes get together and make something, it's very likely going to cater to the interest of male players. For example, Halo, Doom, Call of Duty, and Warhammer 2. Things made predominantly by men for men, and then these franchises, especially in their earlier days when they didn't cater to every moronic idea under the sun, they made crap loads of money off male customers. And once games and other industries started letting in more women and people who identify as this or that, the industry has obviously changed. Games have started pushing ideas that are more so things that women would realistically want to see in games, and in turn those games have not sold well at all or even closed down studios. You want more diverse, politically correct Batman? You did. You got Suicide Squad and it lost $200 million. Or the newer Halo games which keep pushing more female-centric nonsense, or Gears of War as well. I mean, they made a woman the main character over the son of Marcus Phoenix instead in the newer games. Which, okay, fine I guess, but tell me this, what has been more culturally relevant and sold more? The female-led Gears of War, or the previous trilogy where Marcus Phoenix and his bros were killing locusts? We both know the answer to this, let's stop lying just so we don't hurt these people's feelings. The truth is that without men, you don't have a lot of the things in this world. You just don't. And whenever I hear some woman complaining about video games, they're also usually the same kind of people that say stupid things like, oh, we don't need men or something. Which is hilarious considering most women who believe this, they live in a society that was built by men, sleeping in houses also built by men, using the internet, which was designed by men, saying men are worthless as they record themselves on a phone or camera that was also designed by men. These women have become so pampered and out of touch with how easy their lives are, they believe they are entitled to have everything. And this of course circles us back to gaming and Warhammer and all of that too. Games Workshop and Amazon tried to mosey around and bend the knee to appease the female demographic, hoping if they added things like female custodies, it'll bring in legions of women into the hobby. Yet all it ended up doing was ruining the Adeptus Custodes as a faction and effectively erasing them from the community overnight. And if you really wanted to get women involved with Warhammer, you'd lean into the Henry Cavill angle. Sponsor him to make videos painting Warhammer figurines and talking about the brand. That'll get more women interested than anything else, I promise you. And by the way, that same streamer lady who said online games are toxic against her because she's a woman, let's just say it how it is. Mute the game. Just mute it. I mute pretty much everybody I don't know in online games to begin with already. Not because I have thin skin or anything, I do YouTube for a living. I have Reddit threads and weirdo journalists who want me dead every day. If anybody has thick skin, it's me. I just mute people because I don't want to hear someone's kid screaming in the background or pots and pans crashing together or someone's grandpa yelling as well. Just mute people. Once you mute them, they can't do anything. What's next? They message you? Okay, block them. Stop acting like you don't have the tools already available to you to stop the problems you say exist. The reality is that these predominantly female streamers and gamers don't want to solve the problem themselves or change anything about them. Instead, they want you, as in the men within these communities, to change everything about you so that they can exist within these spaces without having to immigrate into them. As per usual, we have another female streamer up in arms about everything while refusing to lift a finger in order to do anything about it. Just solve the problem for her while she sits there doing nothing instead. Yeah, that'll work. Also, this person got exposed for saying something else on stream, so let's watch that one quickly, shall we?
No, it's over, Ina. It's over. Like, if I were to have a boy, we better pray to God that he's gay. We better start indoctrinating him day one. We have to either make him trans or make him gay. We are not having a cisgender straight son.
And there you have it, fellas. This is who the gaming industry is catering to. People like this who thinks being straight is somehow a bad thing, and the fact she uses the word indoctrinate unironically is actually insane. But this is who brands like Warhammer and others are trying to appeal to. Insane feminists who hate everyone that doesn't think exactly like them, and then you wonder why the industry is in such a bad place right now. Men are the gaming industry. They will always make up the majority, and pretty much every franchise that has ever existed was made by predominantly men, because the game industry is a male space that is supported by men for the most part. Look, I'm not saying women can't exist in that space or anything like that, but can we stop lying and trying to contort things when it clearly isn't working? Let me know what you think about all of this, but now let's move on to the second part of this video where this next story pretty much continues this entire discussion too. By now you know about Assassin's Creed Shadows and the whole controversy behind it with Yasuke and all of that. how Japanese fans are angry and so on. Well, of course the gamer has released an article that proves that the journalists are just as tone deaf as these streamers. This one is titled, "They wouldn't want an African Assassin's Creed either. People are suggesting an African Assassin's Creed would be a better place for Yasuke. But they'd be making the same arguments if that's what we had. I figured I'd let the gamer Stacey Henley say their piece here before I tear it into shreds," they said, and I quote, "Assassin's Creed Shadow is set in Japan and is led by a black man, Yasuke. Despite Yasuke being a real person, there have been cries of historical inaccuracy in a series where George Washington founded America to aid his quest for a magic apple. The attack line seems to have resorted to how insulting it is that we aren't playing as a Japanese man, and that they'd be cool with a person like Yasuke if the game was set in Africa. I think we all know that isn't really true. The go-to gotcha for the set in Africa debate is the fact we've already had an Assassin's Creed in Africa, with origins taking place in Egypt. It's an ineffective retort for two reasons. Firstly, there were no complaints about Bayek's skin color or ethnic origin, thus proving the already fake point that people would be fine with an African Assassin's Creed, and secondly, it's not typically what people mean. Yes, Egypt is geographically in Africa, but in the extreme north and with its own legendary history, it feels like a very different biome than the jungles of Mozambique. An African Assassin's Creed would be cool, a story set in the heart of Africa with savannas and tribal culture, a base not covered by the existence of origins. However, these same people crying foul at a black man in Japan would largely be making the same complaints about a black man in Africa. It's not the historical inaccuracy, mostly because Yasuke's presence in Japan is historically accurate, it's the wokeness. There are almost as many complaints about the other protagonist Naoe despite her being Japanese because she's a woman. Playing as anything other than a white man is deemed as unnecessary diversity." End quote. There's so much wrong with this article, it's crazy. First of all, nobody would complain about an African Assassin's Creed game at all. The fact you already disprove your own claims when saying that people had no issues with origins already dismantles your entire argument already. If nobody wanted an ethnic Assassin's Creed, then stuff like Origins or Mirage would fail miserably with fans, yet the exact opposite happened instead. Origins, when it released, led to Ubisoft having a record-breaking quarter when it came out, and the game has gone on to sell over 10 million copies in total. As for games like Mirage, which takes place in Baghdad, and you had playing a Muslim man when not a single white person is seen in the entire game pretty much, that game has sold around 5 million copies and had similar opening sales to Origins and Odyssey. Keep in mind, with Mirage, it was not a fully priced game and was much smaller than Origins, Odyssey, or Valhalla in terms of size. So even for a smaller game to sell over 5 million copies, that's very impressive, and I thoroughly enjoyed both of these games and I platinumed them both. In fact, I think Origins is one of the best Assassin's Creed games ever made. It's easily in my top 5. Both games also, you don't play as white men, so why did they sell so well and all of that? I thought players were all racist and only wanted white men in leading roles. Or is it that those games respected their history and periods by giving players what they really wanted? Predominantly speaking, in those time periods, women would mostly not be seen in any combat role of any kind. You can debate that all you want, but you know it to be true, especially Mirage. I mean, it's a game based on Islamic heritage and ideas. I think why Shadows is getting pushback is because not only is it the first Assassin's Creed game where you don't play someone from that region, although yes, others will bring up Black Flag, but in that game's case, it's the age of piracy and most pirates were European. In Shadow's case also, it's that this is the first time we are actually playing a real historical figure. Think about it, every other Assassin's Creed game you play as someone that's fictional. Yes, there were historical figures within each game, that's fine, but you yourself were not someone that was actually real. This allowed for the gray area that Ubisoft operates within history for these games to work. Assassin's Creed 3 would be getting the same backlash if we played as George Washington instead of Connor. Because it wouldn't make any sense with history or what we know about Washington. When would George Washington have the time to be running on rooftops in New Age America without people recognizing him? It would be borderline impossible to do so, but instead you play as Connor and you're able to circumvent this and have Washington be who he was based on history. And instead he, alongside other figures, are interacting with people like Connor because he's not a real person. The same can be said with Bayek of Siwa in Origins. Had the game starred you as, I don't know, Cleopatra, it would be stupid because we know based on history she didn't actually fight in any battles. She was a political figure who sat in her high-up domain ordering others and then benefiting off of their misery. So if suddenly Ubisoft went, actually Cleopatra was an assassin, it would make zero sense, not only logistically, but historically too. Plus, Cleopatra isn't Egyptian, she's Macedonian, so it would be the same as Yasuke running around Japan. It would make no sense. Assassin's Creed should never have you playing as an actual historical figure, ever. I don't care which historical setting we're in, it should never happen. Even if Shadows had a Japanese male protagonist, sure he could be trained like Naoe is, I guess, by Iga shinobis, but I wouldn't want an actual historical shinobi to be the assassin that we play as, because you immediately chain up that character's believability and freedom when you tie them to a real person. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yasuke could have been in Shadows. He could have been an important supporting character like Da Vinci is in AC2. There's no problem with that. But by making him the playable character when we have evidence that he has never participated in an actual battle of any kind, yet you're depicting him as this legendary samurai who is just killing people without remorse, it completely falls apart. Both from a believability standpoint and the actual records that we have. For example, we know that Jin Sakai in Ghost of Tsushima wasn't responsible for pushing back the Mongol invasion in real life. We know that. However, by making a fictional character and then setting them within a real-life historical event like the Mongol invasion, it creates the perfect scenario and playground for developers to have a story that's set within a real time period. If Ghost of Tsushima had us playing a real-life figure who was stealing and killing people and whatever, it would also be a problem. Basically, the reason why none of this works is simply because you took someone who was real and then made them do things that they never did. It would be like if one day they made a Call of Duty game and they set it in Afghanistan again, and then we played as George Bush, who is depicted as some sort of badass Marine who's just shooting Middle Eastern people as he mows through the Middle East. You'd look at that and go, well, George Bush was never in Afghanistan fighting anybody. He never put on the uniform or got into a tank or operated an AC-130 and took out anybody. At least to the best of my knowledge, he didn't. I don't know. He was, of course, the President of the United States during that time, so why would Call of Duty make him the hero of something he had no actual physical skin in the game with? Now, if you had a Call of Duty set in Afghanistan again, but George Bush was a supporting character and you played as a fictional Marine or something, that's a different story. That's where that gray area comes in again, where a story can be told because the actual historical pieces are all in place where they should be. But while the who is cemented, the why and what can be played with. Yasuke is basically George Bush in a Call of Duty game. That's what he is. And that's why it doesn't make any sense or works, especially at first glance. And I think the sooner we realize this, the better. Don't make actual historical figures the main characters in an Assassin's Creed game, because you end up restricting yourself far more than anything else, and that's the problem here. And saying that fans don't want an African Assassin's Creed game is absolute nonsense, and you know it. I want Assassin's Creed games in every era possible. I want ancient Babylon. I want ancient Rome with an older Bayek. I want World War II where I'm killing Yahtzee Templars. I want a South American Assassin's Creed game too. Hell, even an actual Chinese one that isn't a mobile game like Jade, that would be awesome too. The problem isn't the skin color of the main character, although I'm sure for some it is, I'm not denying that. But it is absolutely because for the first time ever, you took a historical figure and you turned them into something that they weren't. Like, let's say that they made an Assassin's Creed game during the crucifying of Christ. Let's just say hypothetically, okay? If that were to happen, I would not want Jesus Christ to be the playable character, because based on what we know, that wouldn't make any sense. However, if say Ubisoft made a game during that period and said, oh, well, Jesus had this secret follower or something that he knew in secret that enacted his will, or maybe, even more interesting of a premise, you're actually a Templar or some equivalent that is sent to kill Jesus and then meeting him changes you. That could be a really interesting story. But I don't want a game that's set in that period where Jesus or the Mother Mary or Judas is the playable character or anything like that. These characters can exist in the game, yes, but not as the main playable one. Like in Unity, you play as Arno. Imagine if you played as Napoleon. No, it would have been stupid, that's why. And of course, this other article from that Park Place shows the decision isn't paying off just yet. Ubisoft stock plummets 15% after Assassin's Creed Shadows trailer debuts, and company failed to meet forecasted sales figures. Their individual stock dropped from $23.32 to around $20. As you can see here, it's recovered somewhat, but it's still below what it was prior to the announcement. Analysts were also predicting that Ubisoft would bring in a profit of around 350 to 400 million within the quarter, but the actual number is sitting at 299 million right now, which has obviously angered investors. Ubisoft has said in response to this that the company is introducing its financial targets for 2024 and 5 and expects solid net bookings growth, and a slight increase in non-IFRS operating income and growing non-IFRS cash flow from operations leading to positive free cash flow. Their lineup from the premium side includes stuff like Assassin's Creed Shadows and Star Wars Outlaws, two of the industry's most anticipated games for the year. And then they have some free-to-play stuff as well, although both Outlaws and Shadows are mired in controversy for having protagonists that people are either tired of, against, or annoyed of, and they're not even out yet. And saying Outlaws is one of the most wanted games, that's a lie too. The trailer is currently sitting at 2.4 million views with 40,000 likes against 179,000 dislikes. And then if you look at Shadows, that sits at 5.9 million views with 241,000 likes against a whopping 444,000 dislikes. So Ubisoft has two controversial big budget releases coming out that seem to be going down the identity politics route. I guess maybe that streamer I talked about earlier will be happy about that, but for the actual paying customers out there, time will tell, but I doubt it. Between Warhammer's own fans rejecting the Custodes entirely, women demanding entrance into male spaces while doing nothing themselves but complaining, or this stupid Shadows controversy, as you can see, where we are right now is not the best of places. I think it's clear that people are voting with their wallets and time, and companies are reeling because of this. But what do you think about all of this? Let me know as always. Thanks to my patrons too, and like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day. YouTube has also been very dubious lately, but I'll keep pushing, and I'll see you in the next one.